Event. I'm your host, Madalina Andrei, Partnership Manager with xpath.global. For those of you not yet familiar with xpath.global, we are the first SaaS-enabled marketplace in the global mobility sector. Simply put, the first ecosystem that enables the direct relationship between local and regional experts, offering specialized services such as immigration, visa, tax, social security, and corporate clients in need of such services anywhere in the world. This is our 30th live event in the xpath.NEXUS series, a series which has as main goal to become a place where we can share best practices in our industry, learn from each other, and most importantly, grow together. This episode focuses on the challenges faced by both corporates and global mobility vendors when issuing or taking part in the procurement processes. We'll have some great answers and questions thanks to the valuable insights from our fantastic expert panel here. Before giving the floor to my guests, I would like to thank all the attendees for taking the time to join and watch us. Please feel free to drop your comments or address any questions live or just come by to say hello. I'll do my best to cover those as well. And a big thank you to our special panelists here today. I would ask my guests now to briefly introduce themselves and their businesses. We can do that alphabetically so that nobody gets upset. We have to start with Elena Antonec.
Yeah, thank you, Madalina. It's like in high school, having the name with the A.
The catalog. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I suffered from the same playing.
Yeah, so I will be the icebreaker. I'm Elena Antonac. I'm the founder and the CEO of xpath.global. I'm in this industry, in the global mobility industry, for 15 years. I've built an offline consultancy boutique company dedicated to global mobility, mainly immigration and tax. And starting with 2020, I'm taking care of xpath and growing the xpath global SaaS-enabled marketplace, which is actually the first platform of this kind in our global mobility industry.
Thanks a lot, Elena. Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I've been in the industry for 35 years. Hopefully I've hidden it well, not so sure. And last year, I had the opportunity, basically when I left my previous employer, to actually think about doing something on my own. And there were two things I'd always wanted to do if I worked on my own. One was work on sustainability, which I've had an interest in for many, many years. And I work with the whole of the industry on driving systemic change and working on wider sustainability projects. And the other thing was RFPs, tenders. I've always enjoyed tenders, but I've learned from some excellent tenders, and I've learned from some okay tenders, and I've learned from some really, really bad tenders on what works, what doesn't work. So the second part of my business, which is called Inspire Global Mobility Consulting, that I set up in January last year, is working with global mobility and procurement just to help them simplify their tender journey and also maximize the outcomes that they're looking to get from that.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Paul. We'll be looking forward to your insights today. Thank you. Edward?
Perfect. Wow, Paul, 35 years. I wish I had this kind of experience as you. Unfortunately, I only have around 8 years in procurement. So I guess I'm the guy on the other side who makes the biddings and invites suppliers to join the biddings and give the prices. I'm working in procurement, and I have worked with big companies on the market. So I really do hope that we can give some answers to some suppliers or some people who are interested in finding out how to participate and what is needed on the market to win biddings.
Amazing. Thank you, Edward. Renee?
Hi, so Renee Stegman. I am based in Cape Town, South Africa. I run two businesses, actually three businesses, all in the global mobility space. So Relocation Africa I've been running for 29 years. And my residence we started 4 years ago in the temporary housing sector. So sorry, Relocation Africa is destination services, immigration provider, as well as research on the whole of Africa. So then we started My Residence 4 years ago on the temporary housing side. And I have also, my third business is Global Expatriate Management. We do international payroll and payments. And that's been around for 20 years. And Paul and I actually know each other. I also have an interest in sustainable development. So that has been, I think COVID kind of pushed me into sort of learning more about the topic. But our clients vary. So we do have corporates direct as our clients, as well as relocation management companies, and actually as well as other immigration and DSPs who send work our way. So I'm looking forward to contributing to today's discussion.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Renee. I will start with you, actually, precisely with the service provider's perspective on how things look on the receiving end, right? So Renee, on average, how do you receive these kind of requests? Do clients ask for everything all at once, right? I'm thinking long and detailed IT questionnaires, elaborate MSA reviews, queries for tens of supporting documents, or is it a more phased approach with multiple requests spread out over a period of time? For example, contractual reviews received only after you were shortlisted, not everything at once. What are the primary hurdles that you're facing as a professional?
There's a lot of questions in there. I will try and sort of take them bite-sized. And I think the reason I mentioned sort of the types of clients we have is for that purpose as well, because, from a corporate, for example, I'm actually involved with a big RFP at the moment. There is a more stepped process. There seems to be more due diligence around the information we submit. They sort of go into the RFI, sort of seeking out information before they go into a presentation format and then a submission of prices, which is quite interesting. And I feel sort of a very generally a more thought out process. Some of the other processes we're involved with are purely around an Excel spreadsheet completing prices. I would say the sort of relocation management companies, a lot of them, I guess, once you become a provider within their system, they merely sort of do price checks, and unless legislation changes with GDPR or technology requirements, then they don't really come out to you much other than for price checks. And then the DSPs, other DSPs or smaller immigration companies that come to us, they're really coming to us based on reputation, hopefully on the sort of compliance or due diligence they've done. And then they're purely coming to us for a specific client request to assist them more around pricing and service package of what we could actually deliver to a client. So it's quite complex.
So you can't draw like an average. This is mostly how we receive the request, or this is how. It's a combination and it's a mix, and you can't precisely put your finger on.
No, and I mean the questions. I mean, so from what the questions they ask, the reality is we're not sure sometimes if they're tick box exercises or if they're actually genuinely interested in who we are.
So that would be one of your main hurdles, right? Not knowing exactly what is the purpose of the query, right? What is the final outcome?
Exactly. What are they? And actually, and just on that, I would love to know if a client came to us, if it is just a pricing exercise, I would probably still as a business then decide either to contribute and help them towards their pricing exercise, or if it's genuinely to try and seek out us as a new provider within their system, we would then put a certain amount of extra effort into it. So I think the non-transparency of that tender process is a minefield. But I know in some markets, I did a little bit of market research amongst others around the globe, who say that they are circumspect about the tenders that they then start submitting or ignoring. So it's quite interesting from our perspective. It would be better if it was more transparent, because I think the receiving party would get a better information that they were hopefully after.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rene. Let's move to the corporate side and see what the process of identifying global mobility vendors look like, because selecting the right experts can be a truly burdensome process, and there can be serious challenges posed for procurement departments to establish the selection criteria. I will begin with Edward as a general overarching question, right? And then we'll go to the nitty-gritty. How does everything start? Is there a magic matrix that you're starting with, or how does everything begin?
Yeah, I understand. So I think I can answer some questions for Rene. So I think, let's say for the big companies, they have some internal regulation that they must follow when they have like an initial request. It all starts with an initial request. What is the business need? So, for example, if they need to relocate 100, 200, 500 employees around the year, depending on which country or which office, it starts with an initial request. So we need to identify internally what is the request, what is the numbers that we are looking for, and what are the services. Based on that, we are building, let's say, for example, a BOQ, a bill of quantity. It's not kind of technical, but it's stuff like that. And we try to make an estimate. It depends, for example, in the industry, you can sometimes estimate a price, but sometimes you cannot estimate a price. So when you cannot estimate a price, you kind of go in the market and you ask for an initial price quotation. So you go and discuss with some suppliers and you ask them, listen, we have this idea or we want to implement this project. Do you have any idea on what it might cost us? So if we receive some answers from the market, we can, let's say, make internally a budget. Usually we have to apply for the budget to get approval internally. And once that budget is approved, we can go to the next phase, which is kind of the official bidding. So in the official bidding, usually you invite the suppliers to add the prices based on the, let's say, BOQ, bill of quantity that you made, or the list of needs that you have. So they need to add the prices based on what they need, what the company needs. So that's, put it shortly.
Yeah, so I guess thanks a lot, Edward. I think that answers another question that I had for you and Paul. In case there is a budget at corporate level, right? How is this budget matched with the services needed, right? If you're doing any market research done beforehand, let's imagine you need immigration services in 5 different countries, right? How do you know what the budget is for that special project? Yeah, how? But I think, you answered my question. Paul, would you like to add something on that in terms of budgets and market analysis beforehand?
Yeah, and I've had insights to a number of different companies how they approach that, and some are similar to what you've described, Edward. But often there's a disconnect because it's trying to have an understanding of what you're buying. And global mobility, as we know, it's truly a service, and it's a service with a high emotional element to it.
Correct.
And it can seem very simple when we talk through the services, but then those services can get quite complex. And back to what you were saying, Rene, just having some transparency about this, because I've spoken to a lot of people when I was on the service provider side of, you came out for this pricing, it stalled. And they said, yeah, we suddenly realized the pricing that we got was meaningless. So, typically a global mobility program, they already have a provider, and they're looking to benchmark them or they're looking to go out to bid. And I think this is where it's flawed, because if somebody just goes out for pricing, the competitors will typically put in pricing that is not representative of the market. They'll put a caveat on it, it's only valid for 30 days, 45 days. And they're playing a strategic card, basically, or could be, because they know they put in very competitive pricing. So 2 things are going to happen. One, they'll go to the existing vendor and force their pricing down. But then the long-term relevance of that, if that existing provider re-signs at lower rates, when that business does come out to RFP, is to press the rates for the whole of the market. And that's been an issue in the industry for many, many years. Everybody's trying to push everybody's pricing down. But other times people think it's just not representative when they go through an RFP. they thought, hey, we're going to make some huge cost savings here. They go through a whole RFP, spend 6 months a year doing this, and then the outcome financially is not what they got from the market. But it's just the way the market operates. So I think you be careful what you ask for. But I think also, one of the first things that corporations I work with, one of the key things I'm going to help you is actually sell yourself and promote yourself, because a lot of companies think that all the RMCs and everybody is just waiting for their call, their beck and call, and they're going to accept the RFP, and they're going to spend weeks of time, 20,000, 30,000 pounds more responding to this RFP. And I think particularly the RMCs and the bigger companies, and also smart people like yourself, Renee, have said, actually, is this a smart choice? We're going to decline this. And over the last few years, I've seen more people declining bids where, key information isn't shared, the timeline doesn't look right. It just doesn't look like these people are prepared for this. So do we really want to jump into this when we've actually got some nice business? We're actually, we've got some other prospects, some other RFPs coming up. We'll actually decline this one. And a few people I've worked with have been quite surprised, but actually really pleased with the outcomes when they've actually basically sold themselves, taken some time and actually really taken the time to put some really key detail in their RFPs so they get good responses back. So I'm a little bit scared. I understand what you say, Edward, and completely, agree with some of those, but there are some pitfalls in there, just benchmarking, asking for pricing.
Thanks a lot, Paul. We have a lot of guests. Thank you all for watching us. And we have our first question from Panayotis in Cyprus. When you evaluate proposals, how do you make sure the level and quality of services meet the expectations? Thank you very much for this question, Panayotis. You will have your answer soon, because that's one of the that's one of the questions that we have prepared. But to go forward and enter a bit into the nitty-gritty of the problem, Paul, you're working closely with corporate clients on RFP processes, and I have a list of some criteria used for vendor selection that I'd like to go through, so we can all understand a bit better, what is behind the scenes of a procurement process. So, reporting, monitoring, and communication capabilities of a vendor, right? How important are they? I presume the technology can be embedded in this, in the question as well. How is this a really important criterion for the corporate client when they're selecting and assessing a vendor? And another question would be, what happens if an excellent, outstanding service provider doesn't have these capabilities, doesn't have any tech in-house, doesn't? Please.
Yeah, so I'd say there are very important criteria.
There's
a few things here. I hope my memory's as good as Renee's to answer multiple questions. So they are, with all the criteria, very, very important. But particularly with global mobility, they really need to look into what do they actually want. And it goes back to the questions that you ask. If you ask a general question, you get a general answer, and the chances are it will give very low value to you. And when you're in the middle of saying, look at 8 to 10 responses, and you've got 50, 60 questions to look through, that's when the penny drops for people. I wish I hadn't have asked all these questions. So that's what I take people to. This is the scenario you're going to be in. Do you really want to ask that general question? Or, is there a more direct, to the point, but even when I responded to RFPs, I used to actually, in the end, love a yes or no. It's an honesty. Can we do this? Yes or no? And you've got limited space. And you can just say, this is what we do concisely. And I think there's the openness to your other point there about when the and Edward would have some good views on this, I'm sure. But when you go through the evaluation, you already know one of the complexities and the issues is nobody's going to be perfect. The perfect provider is not out there. They're going to have strengths and weaknesses all the way through. And so the company needs to wait where they really, really need, if it's a deal breaker or if it's a nice to have. And on the technology you mentioned, it's never ceased to amaze me the amount of RFPs that have asked for all this technology that they want, everything for their employees. RMCs have spent millions on all this, and then it hardly gets used. I know more technology is getting used now. So again, it's just taking a moment. Do you really, really need this? And I think working with procurement and GM, I've been able to sit in the middle of this, because as procurement, Edward, you may have a good overview of global mobility or you may not. And it's quite hard to actually put forwards a tender if global mobility don't really know what they need. So I can very often sit in the middle of this asking, is there really value in there for answering or asking all these questions? So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, please, Edward, would you like to add something?
I think it all depends on the strategy. I think you can say from the beginning that it's an advantage and it can create an advantage. It depends how you put that advantage. If it comes with a high cost, then sometimes it cannot motivate the company to select you as a supplier if it comes with a high cost. So it really depends on the strategy. I've received numerous offers from companies written like in an email, and some of the companies like with some really nice presentations, some platforms, some kind of special tools that can help us as a company to provide a better service. So of course, if the tool will save us some time or it save us some money, of course it's welcome.
It's relevant.
Yeah, it's relevant. But if it doesn't save us time and it's just like something just nice to have, but it doesn't do us any good, then I'm not that confident that it will be an advantage. So it kind of depends on the strategy, on what the company wants and needs.
Thank you very much. We have a question from John Rayson. Do procurement know the total GM program costs and the relative percentage of the services being procured, not the absolute cost of the services you're asked to procure? Example, DSP might represent 1 or 2% of total costs. Is there a full? I'm sorry, I don't see the full question.
It just says,
is there a full awareness? As Paul is saying, purpose and real drivers are key.
So I would have to say yes, we know, we have this information, but again, it depends on the strategy, on what direction you want to choose and what direction you want to go. So it really depends on that.
Paul mentioned something really interesting a bit earlier, and Edward, I'd like to continue on that idea. How closely does procurement work with HR and global mobility departments, in a tender process? In our industry, the input of global mobility and HR is critical, right, in assisting the selection of GM vendors. How close should the relationship be, between the two departments? And I'm wondering if this relationship is perhaps different if we're talking about just a few cases of overseas assignment here and there, versus bigger and recurring volumes of assignees. You're a procurement manager and you have experience with multiple companies. What's your take on this?
So we have a very close relationship. Basically, if you want to put it like this, procurement is like a support service for internal departments, because usually the internal departments have the budget and they come up with a request. The procurement department is owner of the process. They are making the department is making sure that the process is followed, the money is well spent and wise spent. So they are working closely to define the need and to see what is the strategy and to follow the process, because each company has its own internal process that all the departments need to follow if they want to spend the money. So that's, put it plain and simple. There is a regulation that the procurement department is owner on that process and they need to follow that process.
I see. Thanks a lot. Getting back to Paul and the some more criteria that are used in vendor selection. I'm thinking about the professional certificates. I'm asking this because we've been there, right? Professional certificates usually they do help a lot in winning or losing a tender, right? Green certificates, ISOs, FAIM, EURA quality seals, whatever professional certificates are out there. How important are these in the selection process? I think we're trying to figure out from that matrix of a lot of criteria, which one weighs more than the other, please.
Yeah, first of all, I would say it totally depends on the industry and the type of company. If it's a highly regulated industry, then it's going to be highly compliant, and they're going to have very high standards. If it's more of a smaller environmental industry, or it's a smaller company in a new industry, or it's a company that's only a few years old but has prolific growth, the chances are they're not going to be so compliant. They're very entrepreneurial, and they're getting there with their compliancy, so they would typically have less weight on that. I mean, I think it goes back to looking at the bigger picture when somebody, and this is where procurement works so well, I think, with global mobility, is focusing them on, what are the deal breakers here? And there'll be some potentially that global mobility don't know about, which is that the whole compliance side. Before we can contract with a company, they've got to have ISO 9001 or 14001, or a lot have 27001 or others. The data security, which is huge. So I think Renee, you mentioned earlier about an RFI. I'm a great advocate for an RFI, even if it's got 5 to 10 questions in there. Put the deal breakers in. Don't take a company through the whole process of an RFP if they can't meet your criteria. And some companies out there, this compliance criteria is very, very challenging for the industry. It really is. And it may well be that certain companies think, at the moment, there's nobody in the industry that can provide us global mobility services that actually ticks all of those boxes. And the challenge with that is that then stalls the process, because then you have to go back internally within the company and saying there's a risk here, in this RFP. And I'm sure, Edward, you could share more on, the risk and the internal processes within companies, because this can take weeks to negotiate and move through these areas. So this all needs to be done up front. I think this is where procurement bring in that planning, make global mobility aware of all the steps. And then suddenly from mobility, sorry to keep talking on, this is the problem. Suddenly it's going to take more time for mobility. They've got a view of how long this is going to take and the action they need to take. Now, suddenly there's a lot more actions and a lot more time, a lot more engagement, a lot more form filling. And then they've got less time to plan the scope of work, take some time on the questions, and suddenly everything gets a bit rushed. And you get an RFP going out that potentially isn't as good as the global mobility professionals would have liked, not what their intent was, but they're stuck with these timescales.
Thank you, Paul. But do you believe, and also that's a question for Edward as well, do you believe, is it clear for vendors or partners, let's call them, right, what the rating criteria are from the outset? Who assesses what in a bid, what goes to procurement, what goes to HR, what goes to global mobility, which part of the tender is assessed by this department or that department? Is it clear usually, or should it be clear from the outset?
I mean, does it really matter? I mean, because a lot of it is cross, you may have 3 or 4 different stakeholder groups, evaluating a certain criteria. And this has come up over the years. And when I've been responding to an RFP, I know somebody's going to evaluate it, and they will be a specialist looking at that. So to me, honestly,
it doesn't really matter if it's a procurement guy or an HR or global mobility.
Yeah, I just think the necessary people with a professional view are going to be looking at this. Yeah, I mean that's personally the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah. Do you think it's important, Elena or Renee? Yeah, please.
I would like to add something. It's like I've been in the offline model for so many years, and I really know the pains. And I was part on so many RFQs. So somehow this is in the online is a totally different model, because we created a SaaS-enabled marketplace, and we are assessing, we assessed more than 1,000 suppliers worldwide so far. So what you can find as an HR in our platform is, the same model as in Amazon. If you want services on relocation, immigration, tax, moving, employer of record, you would find hundreds of providers worldwide with ratings in only one place. So you, as a procurement or as an HR, you would be able to assess or to have this first layer of assessment in a platform where you have vetted already, where you get vetted already providers. And on top of that, we created tools. We have an RFQ and bid tool. For example, if the HR would like to organize a tender in, I don't know, in 5 countries, they have access to our platform, and the suppliers would have this RFQ and bid directly into the platform, and they can be part of this worldwide. And when we assess providers, because and we assess so many providers. We have a team dedicated only on assessing providers worldwide, and we've met so many profiles lately. For example, in the last year, we saw like a trend of people leaving Big Four and creating their own companies with a huge knowledge, and when they start, maybe they don't have the tech tools. They still work on Excel. And we've built the SaaS, so actually they can use our SaaS for the client, and they can be compliant. On the other hand, they might not have ISO, but they know how to help an illegal CEO or financial officer to remain in a particular country and to be legal. So in the online, the environment is so different than the offline, because it gives the possibility to the procurement or to the HR to see and to assess, in one place, various types of vendors with the prices higher, lower, and so on. And now we have those tools. For example, AI. We have a tool in our platform which has the ability and the knowledge to give to the HRs the best price for a service, which is, let's say, an average made on the category, on the country, on the particular service. So the online brings a lot of transparency. You have the reviews for the suppliers, because we had a question, and I think it's a question here on the chat on what else do you assess? Do you assess only the values, the prices, or how do you assess the quality? How do you know if a provider would understand your needs, if they will communicate well with the HR? So those reviews are so important. In the offline, it's opaque, it's still hidden, but online comes with a lot of tools and helps quite a lot the HRs and let's say the new model. So yeah, this is on a glance on how it works in the online.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. We have a question indeed from David Welch. Hello, David. Lovely to see you here again. I had experience where a vendor responded yes to technology capability during RFPs, but then later when it came to implementation, they backtracked from their first answer. What we really meant was that, sorry, I don't see it again. What we meant was that it could be developed for a cost to your own company. So any advice to avoid these kind of surprises for the corporate GM team? I have to admit, I didn't think about addressing such a question in my in this panel. So I didn't think about vendors that are lying, Please, René.
Madalina, I've been listening intently to a lot of the sort of broad conversation here, but with that question in mind, I think the biggest problem is relationships. And I think Paul mentioned, having those relationships between, GM and procurement, but also between sort of procurement, if they come out to market, to really build relationships with the potential supply chain that they want to have. And we've been involved with 2 fairly big bids recently, and The one I would say was very unclear as to what they wanted when they came out to market. And the other one I would say has no relationship with us. And so we've kind of submitting blind. And in the one of the final presentations, they gave us a certain time limit, which was 35 minutes to ask technical questions and present our business. Now you can imagine that is impossible. And further to that, a lot of the sort of RFPs, when they come out to us, they in some cases tell us volume. In most cases, they're scared of telling us volume. And, again, I go back to that transparency and relationships. The more transparent you are with your supply chain, the better your responses will be. And the more you have the relationships, you build relationships from the get-go, right at the beginning, to call in a panel of potential people who you would like to submit, to get to know them and understand what they really do. Through that process, you will uncover the quality of their work, the references from their clients, their reputation in the market. Because like David now is sort of saying that someone sort of said, yes, we can do it, and then won the bid by the sounds of it, and then said, well, actually, the cost is for you to bear. I think that is actually the onus is upon the company, who should have perhaps conducted a better due diligence or built a relationship to understand the technical capabilities of that business, and then would have understood actually that they cannot actually deliver on that specific aspect. Because all of us I'll talk maybe for myself, is that I would only like to bid on projects that I believe we can deliver to keep our reputation intact into the future. Being around 29 years, we have a reputation that we want to uphold. So if the client is transparent enough with us, both RMC, DSP, and corporate account, to their supply chain as to what their expectation is, we can manage it better and give them the information that they're asking for. I do feel for, there are a lot of questions that I guess a corporate in procurement maybe specifically want and need. But I do think, I think what someone further down was asking about, the DSP cost is only related to 1 to 2% of the full cost of a relocation. I actually did my MBA thesis in 2000, a while ago, but it is the actual DSP. This is excluding the the actual physical goods movement, but the actual DSP cost is only related to about 1 to 2%. And when you think you're squeezing margins out of 1 and 2% of your entire budget, it seems like you're wasting a lot of time as a corporate. So, you need to look at where the costs are and make sure that you're managing those costs. Your rentals, are yearly. Your maybe household good moves, are bigger costs. And squeeze where the squeeze should be squeezed. Otherwise, you're not actually impacting budget, which is my understanding of what procurement needs to be doing.
Thank you.
I just could say, Rena, if you don't mind, it's the emotional side of this as well, isn't it? Because when you look at, you say to a global mobility person, where's the most noise? It's around housing or schooling. It's a very emotional thing. And as you say, the rates that are paid. So we'll push the rates by 5%, but the impact on that employee's experience and the time that everybody then has to take to actually sort out all the mess, it's so counterproductive, and you're just going down a spiraling funnel. Everything is going, in a negative way. So paying a little bit more, that, many years ago, I'd have a meeting with somebody selling services, before all the compliance. And normally what most people have done is they would say, last couple of weeks, I've just asked around about your company or you specifically, because they know at the end of a meeting, you're going to say, would you try us? And they had the ability to say, yeah, we'll give you a trial move or relocation, or we'll give you 5, or we'll put
a case. Yeah.
But I think we've got to be very careful about that human element, because if we're employing somebody, a lot of an interview is very often, do I want to see your face? Do I want to interact with you on a regular basis? And I think a lot of people forget that they're signing up with a new partner, and they're going to see a lot of them, their communication style, their culture. And, this should all come in there, but you only get this through engaging with people and meeting with people. And actually really kicking the tires, particularly with the account team, not the senior managers, not the salespeople. But yeah.
We have a question from Pratik Arlekar. Hello, Pratik. Lovely to see you here. What are the data protection challenges and risk mitigation practices, especially in co-partner service support in the global mobility industry? Who would like to take that?
If I could kick it off, I think just for if anybody who's on the provider side, I think there's something pretty big coming. We've gone through data protection as an industry, and I think the industry is pretty compliant and has some really good processes. But when you look down through the supply chain, everybody historically has signed a contract to say, they're responsible for their supply chain and the data privacy, which is then very complex across 160 countries, wherever. But who can actually prove that the whole of their supply chain is compliant? And I think be interested in what Edward says, but I can see the way corporations are having to report this, the level of detail they're having to, in the future, they're going to have to deliver. I think there's going to be a big push now beyond ticking that box and saying you prove it. And where are your ratings? What's your mechanism? I think this is going to be a challenge for the whole industry.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're going. Yeah, please. Would you like to add something, Elena?
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, when we built the platform, we realized that if we have suppliers all over the world, for example, outside of the European Union, where GDPR is, let's say, a very big thing, but working with suppliers from India or, I don't know, various other countries, you don't have control on where the data of your clients is really stocked. So of course you cannot control that, but when you have a tool and you offer to the providers a SaaS which is GDPR compliant, then this is a way that you make sure that all the data of your clients are kept in a protected way. Because as I said before, we're assessing hundreds, thousands of suppliers. In 2 years, we assess so many suppliers all over the world. And for example, when we ask them, we assess them, how do you keep your data? And we laughed in the beginning of the conversation with Renee. We had answers like, I keep my data in cloud. Like, where in cloud? Just in the clouds? Well, behind that, there are Excel sheets and, it's not really a security level on that. So yes, I think this is a big issue for the companies to make sure that the suppliers all over the world, especially if they have operations in countries outside of the EU, they are compliant with those rules and with the data protection. Yeah.
And so if I could just add into the mix with data protection, I'd also put labor, human rights, anti-corruption. It's a vast topic, and how, and Renee, you're an owner of companies. I mean, the cost of doing all this correctly, and then do people recognize, the value you actually bring to them?
And actually, I mean,
compliant.
Yeah. It was actually interesting. I was chatting with a temporary housing provider in London the other day, and they are extremely sustainable, to the point where even the paint on their walls have got no chemicals in. They use no chemical products in their whole building. And I said to them, so how many people choose you as a provider of temporary accommodation because you are, so sustainable? And they said, very sadly, it's location and price first. And so the reality with, us as a provider is we have to comply. We have no choice. Certainly if we want to be recognized as a quality provider who is compliant, but we don't get recognized for it. And I know that, terrible to say this, but companies and RMCs choose providers who aren't compliant and over those who are compliant. And so it makes no sense to me. But we as a company, we hold ourselves, high in terms of, mitigating our risks. So we actually operate as a quality provider. But it is sad to see that RMCs and companies don't necessarily do all their due diligence and check the people that they're using in their supply chain are compliant. And I say this in the same hand, I want to say that there are a lot of small SME companies who are trying to come into global mobility, and it's much harder for them because of all the due diligence required. And in that arm, I would like to say that, it's actually up to relocation management companies and corporate clients to support them to become compliant. So it's not necessarily, only using completely compliant, because entrepreneurs try and get there. But it is, how do you support them in that process to make sure that they are compliant? So it becomes a sort of, spread the net bigger in terms of increasing your supply chain.
I
Thanks a
totally
lot.
agree. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Renee. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, there are so many knowledgeable, so many suppliers, boutique, small consultancy companies with an excellent, great knowledge and client service. But being, for example, in the start of their company and so on, they don't have, let's say, the finances or the capabilities to understand how everything works, and to kick out a provider with a knowledge like that, it's really a pity. And we, all the other actors, should have or should build the tools because technology would help massively. Yeah, even with the quality. Probably you all know the Upwork or Fiverr platforms where the freelancer, they're offering their services. You cannot imagine how focused they are on services, because they are hunting those reviews. They want to please the client and to have those good reviews in order to get more and more stars, and more clients. So this helps. And yes, I totally agree that we should have tools in place, and to allow providers who maybe cannot afford. But on the other hand, I fully agree with you that when me as a former service provider, in boutique consultancy company, we were fully compliant. We had all the certificates, all the ICOs and so on. And when participating in those RFQs and bids, of course, not all the time, but many companies, the focus was mainly on price without looking on, the other elements. You're asking me to have all those, certificates in place, tax consultant.
Is it true, Edward? Is it true?
So
Yeah.
I'm guessing it depends on the country. So basically, mainly in let's say well-developed countries, they do respect that the companies have the certificates. And I've seen most of the time that, I mean, all of the time, they require at least the minimum certificates that the law is requesting. Some companies can have this, and other companies can go above and beyond. They require extra certificates. So again, it depends on what and how much they want to spend, because these certificates, I'm sure they cost money, and I'm sure they cost money or time or experience or both. So it depends. And I've seen in not so well developed countries where they kind of not wanted the certificated company. I mean, it made the price
It
difference,
was. Yeah. We have a question from Jairo. According with your experiences, how complex the whole process can be, and if there are any regions that the company probably can face more challenges than others. This takes me to a question that I had in mind regarding the harmonization criteria, perhaps when we have a tender that goes global or regionally. Are there any regions more challenging than others, perhaps? Edward, Paul, from a procurement perspective?
I can answer first. So I think for me, as from my experience talking, it's depending on the local law, it can be a challenge, because in some countries there is a certain practice, and in other countries there are other practices. It depends also, let's say, on the nationality. I mean, the local. I'm missing the word. local practice, how they work over there. So it kind of depends. So Asian people, companies usually work in a certain way. European usually work in different ways. So
it has like a cultural component, you're saying.
Culture.
Yeah?
Thank you. That was the missing word. So it depends also on the culture and also on the legal point of view. So you have to adapt on each project that you have, and you have to take that into consideration when you are going in a certain region. You have to take that into consideration. That is a must, because it can be a win or a loss for you.
We have thank you very much, Edward. We have another question from Charles. Hello, Charles, in Oman. Do global providers have their own in-house teams in each country, or do they actually outsource the services to other in-country specialists? Well, René?
Do global providers have their own in-house teams in each country?
A provider that covers, for example, an entire continent or multiple countries, if they're having their own in-house. Yeah.
Well, so we centralize all our processes into one region, South Africa. So we handle all our admin head office in Cape Town, but we obviously deliver services in almost 40 odd countries across the continent, 54 for our research. So it depends on that, but all of the procurement side, or the sort of responses to the RFPs, is done from our perspective here. I'm not sure if I've answered that question, but
yeah. Thank you, René. Tracy also answered that her opinion is to outsource to in-country specialists for some services is important for SME purposes. We have a question from Steve Asher as well. Hello, Steve. Thank you for being here. Do global mobility RFPs include international remote working? And if so, what would procurement be looking for? Edward and Paul?
Sorry, Edward. Yep, you go.
I said you can answer, but okay, I'll give it a shot. So it can include the international remote working, but in my experience, it was not the case all of the time. So it was not, let's say, a usual practice for remote working. Usually when you relocate to that country.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to add a bit on this topic with the remote workers. What we saw with our clients, the tendencies or the focus of the HR is not really on the remote workers, because it's they choose to work abroad, so it's their own decision. But the HRs, and this is actually a type of service which we think and we see that it's growing. Because the companies on the compliance level, with this policy working from anywhere, you know that there are a lot of CEOs of big technology companies, and they came out on the scene and they said, for our Airbnb, all the employees will work remote. So right now the HRs are trying to accommodate the remote workers. They don't do bids so far, but they are searching for suppliers to recommend. To recommend to the remote worker, and as well to have, let's say, a partner in some particular countries which are mostly preferred by remote workers.
Thank you. Thank you. Getting back now to the beginning, to the criteria, I think about now sustainability, and I'd like to hear Paul. Paul is the creator of the industry first sustainability educational program for the European Relocation Association. Does sustainability play a role in choosing the right vendors? How is this assessed?
Yeah, and this is interesting because it'd be interesting, Edward, to get your view, because I've spoken to different procurement people who've actually been tasked by their company with whatever they buy, they've got to buy the most sustainable service or product that's basically available or going to be available. But the challenge is when they get to global mobility, suddenly it's complex. There's a big supply chain, particularly when you've got multiple services or you put domestic in there as well and the wider services. And the whole industry is in its infancy. But what I, in procurement, I've seen are looking for is, it's the companies that, what are you measuring? What are your targets? What have you committed to? And I think the industry is at a crossroad. I think there's a lot of companies in the industry that have done amazing things service provider wise. They're looking at the UN Global Compact or the Sustainable Development Goals, science-based targets. They understand what scope 1, 2, 3 emissions are, and they're talking the right terminology, and they're mapping out what they're going to commit to and putting some timescales in there. So there's going to be tangible outcomes. And the really smart ones have looked at what are the big ticket items for the corporates? What are they actually looking for? And a lot of it is environmental led, climate change led. But increasingly, there's a push from big corporates to now put that it's a very good social environmental measurement that they're actually looking for. Climate change is very, very important, and it's potentially easier to measure.
How?
Well, because you can actually measure. So you can measure your energy usage, you can measure your travel. Okay. You can measure certain parts of your supply chain. Scope 3 is the big one. There's 15 elements in scope 3, and supply chain is in there, travel's in there, commuting, work from home, etc. But you can start measuring it, and then you commit to what actions you're going to take to reduce it. And then you can actually get your measurements and start getting them assessed, because essentially you need to get them assessed and give them some credibility. And this is where it becomes very complex. And you look at the biggest companies in the world, and Renee knows a lot about this, about ESG reporting. They're all using different criteria. They're all flipping around the measurements, and a lot of them have been called out. So I'll give you an instance. You can have a science-based target, and you can use location or market-based energy data, and it will give you a different outcome. So you could look at the high-level data from one company against another and think, well, actually, this company's doing better. But when you look at the methodology and the criteria and how much of that scope they've included, you're like, whoa, well, actually, they're worse than this other one. So how could it be the measurements are different? So, sorry, it suddenly got very complex, but I think most procurement, most global mobilities are saying, the industry's in its infancy. What can it be done? But we want tangible outcomes. And there was a recent RFP where the procurement said straight away, we've got two different camps here. The ones that have written pages on this are actually doing nothing. And the ones that have done something about this have just very concisely bulleted it out, what they're doing, and they're using our terminology and they understand it. So straight away, they split this into two different camps. So, yeah, sorry, covered quite a bit there.
Thank you, Paul. Edward, would you like to add something?
So I think from a sustainability point of view, it kind of becomes a competition now between the big companies, because it's good marketing for them, and they really invest in some areas. I would say they are investing a lot in areas which they are making also some profits or some savings. So this is really interesting for the big companies. So yeah, I think sustainability is kind of important, but it also depends on what advantages it can bring you. Not to just to have it there and to give some money that you will not see it come back. So it kind of depends on what you get back.
I see. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have 2 more minutes. Doesn't really matter if we go through. If we go over the time allotted. I'd like to wrap up the session on a very positive and helpful note, right? So, Renee, from a service provider perspective, how does the ideal RFQ process look like? What would be your main, I don't know, top 3, top 5 expectations when participating in an RFQ, in an ideal situation?
In an ideal situation.
Yeah.
So I would definitely think getting the service providers involved as soon as possible to build that relationship. I think transparency in terms of being really upfront about what you are looking for as a corporate client, or if it's an RMC, what they are specifically looking for. As I said earlier, we'd be happy to help if it's just a pricing exercise, but we want to know that, because then we can put it in our to-do list and where it sits. I think, we talk about volumes, people are scared of it. I don't think it's something to be scared of. The more information you give us to be able to price negotiate, because often we get no volume, and then at the end it's like, how negotiable are you on your price? Well, how are you going to pay me? Are you going to pay me 60 days, 30 days? So I think, the more information you give, it makes it fair, it makes it sustainable. We've got businesses to run, and our objective, certainly our very own Relocation Africa and my residents' objectives, are to be around for the next 30 years. And so we want to make sure we're making a profit. So yeah, I think those would be my main 3 points.
Thank you. Amazing. Paul and Edward, if we can make like a top 3, perhaps, what should vendors bear in mind when they are being invited for an RFP? As procurement experts, I'm sure you have some golden rules, up your sleeve, some recommendations for for best practices for vendors to adhere to.
Edward, do you want to kick us off? Sorry, I've been talking a lot.
Please, Edward.
Please.
So you said 3, right? I'll try to keep it short. So I think the most important thing for a supplier is to pay attention on the RFP or RFQ, depending on how you are familiar with the term. So if the request for price or request for quotation is, let's say, very detailed and specific, it has all the information, including the services that you need, the payment terms, even the currency that you want to get paid, or like any details that you think, this means that the company is kind of serious and you should pay attention. If it's just an RFP sent on an email or something like really light, then probably the company needs to have like a certain amount for a budget, or they are not so professional. So I think this is one of the things that I would recommend. Second of all, for all the suppliers who are working with big companies, they have to keep in mind one important thing is that when you are working with a big company, you have to make sure that you are included in their vendor list. So each big company has a vendor list, official vendor list, that is registered in the system. If you are not registered in the system, then probably they are just looking for a potential supplier or for a potential, maybe, let's say, price, to see what is in the market, what is to have a benchmark probably. So, and the third one is no PO, no work. So if you don't receive a purchase order from a supplier, don't do the work, because probably you are doing some work and you are risking not to get paid. If you don't have an official purchase order, don't work. Just ask for the PO.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, just a couple really. And certainly agree with you there, Edward, on your points. One is, I'd say be very open. We talk about greenwashing in sustainability, but, don't overemphasize. If you can't do something, I've learned my lesson on this over the years. It's better to say to people, look, we'll be honest with you, we can't do this, but we can do this, give them a solution. Because what you're actually doing is you're by being open and honest with people, you're actually building up a lot of credibility and a lot of trust. And that may actually distinguish you from other people who've said, yep, we do everything and we do it amazingly. Now, it might not always work, but I've had instances where people have over the years said that was one of the things, we like the companies that are honest, and we were looking for a credible long-term partner. The other one is just be concise. At the end of it, you get a view when you're reading endless RFPs, you get a nice view of a company that's really listened to your understood your question, and they put it very, they haven't taken their standard answer. They've changed it and made it very concise, use some bullet points. If they're able to, perhaps put a visual in there. Don't put endless attachments in, because, they might not always get read. I would put the main, what you want to get that in wording. It could be hard, and attach a visual, attach a document for additional information, but don't rely on somebody opening that attachment, because it may not happen, even if they requested an attachment, etc. So just be careful. But it's playing a game, isn't it? You're trying to jump into their mindset of who the buyers are, how they work, what they're going to appreciate from the response. The other thing is make it a document that looks like theirs. If you can go into some of their documentation, look at the colors they use, look at the typeface they use, the more you can make it an internal document
familiar to them.
Yeah, you feel use the wordings they give. If they call them, I can remember with Google many years ago, somebody said, they're called Googlers. Well, let's call them Googlers. And we thought everybody would, and Google called that out.
Paul, sorry, I need to add the fourth rule. You just pointed exactly. So numerous times I have sent requests for price in our format, and we receive like in a different format, which is totally different that we asked for, and we have like sometimes to copy the information and put it into our format, and so it's double the work. So I've seen sometimes like some of my team members saying that I don't want to work with that supplier. He's not replying in the format that we want. He is really tough to work with, and I don't want to work with him. So yeah,
it matters.
Matter exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do the basics. Do the basics.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. And the last question goes to Elena. Like a summary, Elena, please. If the new business landscape might have been changed by the pandemic, changing the way the clients are actually selecting and assessing the vendors and the whole RFQ process.
Yes, what we saw so far is that the HRs and the corporate clients and fast-growing companies and so on and so forth are so much keen on digitalization, on technology. Technology is solving so many problems. Imagine that we have a digital RFQ tool, so it really makes a difference. Instead of sending hundreds of sheets per country, it's so easy to have an RFQ, a digital RFQ with everything in one place. So in my opinion, I think that the companies will take the leap. The focus will be on tech tools. So we will have a more transparent way of organizing RFQs and bids in the let's say the years to come. And we believe in technology, and online is the future. Where everything is transparent and you have access to everything, quality, prices. And
thank you.
Could I touch? But where do you believe there's got to be a balance though? Back to that personal touch, and we've seen so many industries just go down a technology tunnel, and can it become a bit of a soulless experience for everybody?
No, Paul, it's like the tools are not. Let's eliminate the personal touch, because you have to answer. But you have the tools to do it faster. Imagine now, instead of organizing a conference in, in a hotel with 40, 60, 100 people, we just have this live event, through a tool, which actually brings people together faster, in a very fast way. So tools will help us to, digitalizing the industry will help us to organize RFQs, bids, and online presence and everything much faster. This doesn't mean that of course when we meet during a conference we don't have the fun and the joy to meet each other, of course, but the interaction, we have much more interaction now, right? And now even business is much more business because we can close a deal on a Teams meeting or on a Zoom. So this is
sounds a good balance. Thank you. Thank you. Sounds very reasoned.
I'm sure you all agree that this is a topic that will never grow out of fashion. So perhaps we should revisit it, in a couple of weeks and do another session, because we have left a lot of areas not touched. Right, we have not covered all our questions, but I'm always a fan of having more questions than less. Yeah, so we're good. I think this would wrap up the session. It's been great. Thank you very, very much for your participation. I'm sure the audience has found it extremely useful. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us, for the great insights that you have shared with us. Thank you all for watching us and for being here with us. In case you need further expert advice from our panelists, please reach out to them directly. I'm sure they will be more than happy to help. Until our next event, please feel free to follow us on social media or head up to our website, xpath.global. Book a demo session with us to learn more about our SaaS-enabled marketplace and how it can be a game changer for your business. Thank you very much, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.